Welcome to Life After, a podcast for women to take you from feeling like you're just surviving to thriving, to creating a life you really love. Expect to discover tips and tricks to get there. Each episode will have actionable steps to empower you to make changes. I started this podcast because I've been through it all, from getting out of a marriage with a narcissist to completely rebuilding my life. And now I'm on a mission to help you too. You can change your life. It's absolutely possible. Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you're here. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what you tell your brain it believes. I absolutely love this topic. It's one of my favorites. And I think part of the reason for that is knowing that what you tell your brain it believes really gives us some agency to start thinking about what's working well and what we could or might want to be doing differently to change our lives. Now, this topic can go in so many different directions. It's probably another reason I love it so much, which means we have lots of options and opportunities to make and see shifts in our lives. Specifically, we're going to talk about what are the messages you are consistently giving yourself that you maybe want to think about shifting. And also, what are you telling your brain that might not be working with what your body already knows? The basics about what you tell your brain believes starts with first acknowledging that little gremlin voice in your head. When we have a voice that we hear over and over again, what message is it sending us? And more importantly, do we want that message? Because so often it can be one of those little gremlins talking to us, and we don't want those messages. Those are the messages that tend to be the ones that bring us down or create negativity in our lives. Now, I want to mention that there's a reason that I call them the little gremlins. In part, I learned that term while going through my coaching certification program, and it just kind of stuck with me, and I kind of like it. But then I realized as I started to think about what those little gremlin voices really represented, for me to think of them that way, it's a way to manage them. I'm able to see this little creature that's taking space up in my brain that I can easily pick up and move wherever I want. So somehow this characterization or this visualization of those negative thoughts in my brain as these little creatures that I can just scoop up and move to someplace else has helped me more easily go through the process of letting the little negative gremlin voices go. So that's just kind of why I call them that. And maybe hopefully that visual will help you as well as you move through the process of wanting to make some changes. So, and I have to tell you, I had a lot of those little gremlins to release back into the wild at one point. So I like the visual of being able to move them on. Now, I realize that not every gremlin is equal. Some of them can take a little more time and energy for us to extricate from our brains. And, they also may take a little more intention. Time and intention is something that we sometimes have to put into when we want to change those little gremlins. And also sometimes we need help. We need help shifting our perspective and looking at those little gremlins in a different way. And that's completely okay. Not every gremlin that we're going to experience is equal in our heads. And certainly not every little gremlin carries the same weight for us as it may for others or vice versa, right? So, it makes sense completely that that's what happens, is because our gremlins are as unique as we are. And we carry them because of our individual experiences that have shaped us. I was talking to a client recently and I was using my math example. You know that one. I tell it so often when we talk about this topic. And I do so because it's really such a great example of how something that can be said to us, a single sentence in this case, that influences us for, many, many, many years. I think I had that voice in my head for 30 years before I took my power back. So if you're new to the podcast or you haven't heard an episode before where I talk about this, my math example is that I was in advanced math until about 8th grade, which then was geometry, which I have a kind of a hard time visualizing 3D things in the real world or vice versa. And so I was at a conference and the teacher said to me, "You'll never be better than a B student in math." And man, oh man, did that one sentence from a teacher who I can't remember what he looks like. I can't remember what his name is. I know nothing about him. The power of that one statement that stuck with me for 30 years is a great example of how when we've got a little gremlin voice in our head like that, we really do have the power to change it. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So in any case, I'm going to go back to my client. I was telling my client that story, and they said to me that they'd never had an experience like that with a teacher because they always looked at what the teacher said as feedback. So I wanted to give you that, not just my experience, but the experience of my client, to show that we all have different experiences, that we perceive and interpret those experiences differently, and that it all can create our own personalized, individualized gremlins. So it doesn't matter what your gremlin is. It doesn't matter how many or how few of them you have. The purpose of this episode is to talk about what they are, give a funny little face to them so it takes away some of their power and reminds you that you've got the control to move them. And also, just to know it's different for everybody. There's no right, wrong, good, bad. It just is. And whatever our experience has been is going to be kind of what dictates what our gremlins look like. So the first step when we think about our little gremlins is to acknowledge them. We actually have to think about them and acknowledge them. And you don't have to tackle them all at once, right? You don't have to go, I have, 12 of them I got to deal with. No, you can deal with one at a time. You can deal with more than one at a time. You can do it however you want to when you're ready to. Simply just being aware of them and aware of this process is going to help you sort them out and take these steps we're going to talk about. And the thing is, once you've done it more than once, sometimes those smaller gremlins, the ones that maybe haven't been with you for as long or didn't have as much of an impact, they'll be easier to process through. One other thing, I always like to tell people this as well. Those little gremlins are often the voices of someone else, like my math teacher. When that's the case, I find it's really helpful when we identify who or how started that little gremlin voice in our head, where it originated. It can be easier to move away from our negative thoughts when we recognize they didn't come from us. It was a message that someone maybe intentionally tried to or didn't. In the case of my math teacher, I don't think at the time he thought he was doing any harm, right? In fairness to him. But when we recognize that the message, whether intentional or not, is coming from somebody else and is in our head because of somebody else, then it's, to me, easier to say, that was my math teacher talking. That's not true. There's no truth in that. My math teacher, and who knows what was going on with him. Maybe he was having a bad day. Maybe he had some issue in his own life. Maybe he'd had a fight with his daughter that morning. Like, who knows? I don't even know if he had a daughter, right? But when we recognize that the voices are someone else's, we can really, really, really strongly question them and get through this process just that much more smoothly. Once I realized that so many of my thoughts were representations of things like, for example, my ex wanted to convince me of. It was so much easier to exercise them from my brain. So much easier to get rid of them. So once you've acknowledged some of those little gremlin voices, the next step is simply to begin to practice just stopping the thought. Just stop yourself mid-thought. I call it blunting the thought, which I know might sound kind of like a funny way to put it. I call it that though because you are literally, when you practice this, you're literally in the middle of thinking it and you just go, "Oh, yep, there it is. I notice it. I'm done." So you could literally be, I could be, instead of hearing the whole "you'll never be better than a B student in math," I could hear "you'll never be," and I can recognize, "Oh, there's that little gremlin. I'm done. I'm blunting it. I'm not going to even think the rest of it." Right? You can decide to either not finish the specific thought or to not continue to think all the things you think after that little gremlin voice has reared its ugly head. So I'm going to give you an example. "You'll never be better than a B student in math." See, I'm not good at math. How could I ever take the GRE to get into grad school? I won't pass the math portion. There's no point in me even trying, which means I'm never going to get into the school I really want to get into. I'll never be able to accomplish my lifelong dream of getting my master's degree in criminal justice. See how that one sentence, "I'll never be better than a B student in math." And notice, I never noticed this till right now, but notice the math teacher said to me, "You'll never be better than a B student in math." But after all these years, and even though I'm so aware of it, I translated it into "I'll never be better than a B student in math." That's not a grammatical thing. That's your brain learning how to process it in your own voice, which is why knowing where it came from can be so powerful. So see, that one sentence, "I'll never be better than a B student in math," can completely change the trajectory of our lives. Now, I know that might sound a little dramatic. Completely change the trajectory of our lives. You all know I can be a little dramatic sometimes. I got that flair. In this case, though, that chain of thoughts, is exactly what I thought to myself again and again and again. And for many years, every time I thought about trying to go back to grad school again, that was the loop that played in my head. And so I never even got started. And you want to know something that's totally crazy? Because of COVID, the graduate program that I went to removed the GRE testing requirement to increase people applying. That's why I applied, because I didn't have to take the GRE and, in my mind, risk, quote unquote, failing the math portion. And that kept me from reaching my lifelong goal. So I was able to go back to grad school because of a loophole that they'd created because of COVID. I hadn't at that point still gotten over that I'll never be better than a B student in math. Now, I tell you this only to really, truly substantiate that I really, really mean it when I say that what we tell our brain can truly impact our lives in such a derogatory way. And when we can find other ways to get out of our own way, we can live the lives we desire and deserve. And here's further proof of that. Getting my master's degree, when I started the program, I used to tell people, "Oh, it's just the most expensive hobby ever. It's a lifelong dream. I've always wanted to do it." I never actually knew what or if I would use this master's degree. It was a goal and it was something I always wanted to do. So I moved forward. But getting my master's degree has completely changed my life. It's changed the work I'm doing. It's changed what I feel like my purpose is, and therefore my contribution to the world. These messages matter. They matter. It is worth taking the time to sort it out, process through them, and change them. They really matter. And just as a side note, going through that rigorousness of my specific grad program was what finally allowed me to let go of the thought, I'll never be better than a B student in math. So the thing that prohibited me for so long from taking action, that one sentence, without starting that program, who knows how much longer I would have kept that message in my head. Okay, that was my little diversion. But I think it's important. I really hope you captured that. Maybe go back and listen again. Really important, those ideas. First thing you're going to do is acknowledge the little gremlin voice. Second thing you're going to do is blunt that thought. You're going to blunt it. And sometimes we do that because it just feels too overwhelming to try to stop the whole train of thought and replace them with more positive messages in that moment. It's just really breaking the process down into more manageable chunks. And then don't worry, because you'll be able, with some practice, to move on to the next step. All right, you blunt the initial thought, then you can take the next baby step, which is to distract yourself. Again, we're really breaking this down into microcosms. So if it feels onerous at the moment, it's just once you start practicing, it'll get a lot easier. So focus on something other than the gremlin voice. Focus on something different. Now, this can literally be changing your focus to something else. You start the thought, I'm never going to be better than a B student. Just stop it right there. And when blunting that thought and refocusing, you can either move to another thought. What time is it? I wonder if the kids will be home soon. What should I do next on my to-do list? I'm going to get ready for my next meeting. Anything that distracts you mid-sentence, you can do it that way. Another way you can manage distracting yourself or refocusing on from that little gremlin voice, and it's a much more woo-woo-y option, is you can literally put up an energetic wall or door when thinking the thought. So you start the thought, I'm never going to be good at math. I'm never going to be better than a B student. And somewhere in the process of blunting the thought, you visualize shutting a door in front of that thought or a wall going up against that gremlin voice, putting literal, something physical between you and that voice, between you and that thought. In that case, you are visualizing energetically shutting the voice out, shutting the message out. And when you do that, your brain is disconnecting from the thought you want to let go of. So I learned that tactic from a really good friend of mine that has been a therapist for 30 years. She taught me that trick. And I know that both ways work. So whatever feels best for you, if you like to practice the woo-woo-y stuff and want to do something that feels strongly energetic, you can insert the wall or the door or a window, right? Windows aren't as good because you can kind of see through them. But sometimes I get really fancy and I have windows with dark curtains on them, right? It just kind of depends. Or you can just simply distract yourself. Regardless of whether you choose the distraction method or the energetically cutting the thought off method, please give yourself lots of grace in this process. It takes practice. There are several steps here, and it takes time to integrate them. So, and like I just said, with that practice, you're going to definitely notice that whichever gremlin voice you're trying to deal with is going to have less real estate in your head. It feels good when that happens. And once you're comfortable stopping or blunting the little gremlin, then the next step is to replace the thought with something that is either more positive or something you want to change, something more forward thinking. And if you've got some questions on how to do that, you can always be thinking about what do I want, what do I want instead to help give yourself that clarity, right? So if we stick with my math example, it could be, I'll never be better than a B. I'm going to blunt that. And when I'm ready to do the whole process in my head, I kind of do that blunting. I might have just a fraction of a second where I think about a wall or a door and do that energetically. And then I'm going to say something like, I got through grad school and high-level statistics classes. I can do math, right? I got this. So if you want something that's more forward thinking for a change you want to make. An example that I could have used in the past before I went to school would be to say, I'll never be better than a B student, cut myself off there and say, I have the experience and capacity to successfully take the GRE to get into grad school, right? You can turn it that way too. Now, it's really, again, I think I've used this word like 16 times already, so I apologize. It's really powerful though, because it can be used when you're wanting to change your mindset regarding something small or something really big. You can use the same process regardless of what you want your ultimate outcome to be. And over time, what you're going to see is as you practice this process from start to finish, even just practicing parts of it, you're going to see a shift in your general mindset as well. You'll find that just generally, you'll start to critically question those things that pop into your head that you don't really want to deal with. And like I used to say to myself, oh, I'm so stupid, right? I would just say it in passing, like it was no big deal. And so going through this process for some of these thoughts, I, I, I can consciously think about, oh, if I've done something that I wish I hadn't done, I'll say, oh, that was silly. Instead of I'm so stupid, oh, that was silly, right? So you get this kind of general shift in your mindset that becomes, it just creates some peace and space in your life, which is really lovely. Of course, this doesn't mean you won't still have moments. We all do. And I suspect after this episode where I've said I'll never be better than a B student in math like 50 times, I'm probably going to have a dream tonight about not being good at math, right? I mean, we have to be mindful of the messages that we're giving ourselves routinely. And we're still going to have moments, right? Even when I don't believe that anymore, but I just keep saying it to myself in this episode. The thing is, it even when we have those moments, going through this process, teaching us ourselves this means that we'll have the power to choose when we want something or when we want something to be different. We have that power. And that's the value in it, really. I also want to mention that sometimes, and it might seem like kind of a strange segue here, sometimes what we tell our brain, the messages that we tell our brain, are out of sync with what our body already knows. And this is a slightly different way that those pesky little gremlins can show up for us. So our brain is really good at telling ourselves stories. Our brain also is constantly trying to make sense of things, to explain them, to justify, to smooth things out. And the example I'm going to give here is relationships, especially when we're in relationships or situations that are confusing or painful or difficult or challenging. Our brain is constantly working overtime to try to create a narrative that allows us to sort it out, which often means, depending upon what is happening in our lives, it puts us in a position of staying in a relationship that might not be great for us. And you might find yourself thinking in a situation like that. You're in a toxic relationship, and it doesn't have to be with a partner. It could be with a boss or a coworker or a friend, a family member. Your brain is trying to smooth out what's happening. So the messages that maybe you're giving yourself are, oh, it's not that bad. Maybe I'm just overreacting. I could just try harder. Maybe they didn't mean to do that, say that, be that, right? So recognize that while your brain is busy explaining things away, trying to talk yourself out of it, that's what some of those little gremlin messages can do. Your body could be sending a very different message. Your body might feel the tension when that specific person walks in the room. Your stomach might oh, you might feel that horrible dropping or nauseousness in your stomach when your phone rings and you see their name pop up. You might just feel completely and totally wiped out and exhausted after having a conversation or a meeting with them. Or just notice that you're generally on edge. And so your shoulders are tight and you just feel contracted. Maybe you're always trying to anticipate the next mood or reaction. And so you feel that in stiffness in your body or inflammation, right? Your body notices patterns of what's going on both in your brain and in the relationships you're having before your brain is often ready to accept it, acknowledge it, deal with it, change it. Now, that is not a matter of weakness. Make no mistake. It's how we're wired. Our nervous system is specifically designed to be scanning for safety and or danger constantly, right? And I did an episode recently about fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so our nervous system is acutely aware. We're paying attention to how people communicate with us. What is their tone of voice? What are their facial expressions in addition to the words they're using? Is there tension? Is this person unpredictable? Things that our logical brain, our neocortex, might very well try to just rationalize away. And remember from that episode, Fight, Flight, Freeze, and Fawn, that if we're in survival mode, that is the primary way with which we are relating to the world. So our body is going to know what's happening long before our brain catches up. And it's not always about trying to convince your brain of the new thing, the right thing, the better thing. Sometimes we have to recognize it's about slowing down long enough to listen to what your body has been telling you all along. Your body may very well already know, it does already know, I just know this to be true, that something isn't right, that you're in a relationship or a situation that isn't safe or healthy. Your body's going to know that you deserve better. I'm going to give this example. I was when we lived in California, I did a whole bunch of like CERT trainings. CERT is Community Emergency Response Team. And so we did a whole bunch of trainings. And I asked a law enforcement guy once, how do you know to listen to your body? Like, what does your body do when to decipher if danger is actually occurring? And I'll never forget his answer to me was, for him, the hair on the back of his neck stood up. And just, I've often thought about that over the years, and just the absolute primal reaction that your body has to have when the hair on the back of your neck stands up in a situation, when you're assessing danger. So sometimes we got to slow down, and sometimes we got to reteach ourselves how to listen to those really important signals our bodies are giving us. And I'm going to give an example. It's been many years since I've had this experience. While I was married, I was constantly sick, and I often had issues that just couldn't be explained. I was exhausted, but they couldn't explain why. And I was constantly getting colds and sinus infections and just crazy stuff, right? But what really stood out for me was I had consistent back problems. So I was completely healthy, a runner, super active, but about every 8 or 10 months, the pain in my back would flare up. And it was always kind of just like, well, what happened? Nothing. I couldn't tell you what had happened. I would wake up one day and I'd be in pain. And sometimes the pain was so bad, I'd even have to go to like urgent care or ER, and I'd get meds. You all know I hate taking meds, but I would be forced to take meds and have to take a day or two to recover. And one of my worst episodes ever was about a year or two before my ex and I split up. And then nothing. After my ex left, and it was probably 18 months or 2 years later. So easily two of my normal pain cycles with my back just freaking out. I realized that I hadn't had any back pain since we split. My body knew exactly what was happening in the relationship and that I was ignoring it, and it was trying to get my attention. So a couple of things here. In using this example, I want to make it abundantly clear. I am not a doctor. So please always be sure to get yourself checked out if you're having any kind of problem. And there is no judgment here. There is absolutely no judgment or criticism here, ever. There's never any judgment or criticism. I've made every mistake you can make at least twice, and often way more times than that. And sometimes, what are we avoiding? And learning to reconnect what our body knows with what our brain is willing to acknowledge can be a really powerful part of managing the little gremlin voices that are trying to stay hidden, that are trying to be under the radar, but they're ever present. So again, no judgment or criticism. I can tell you with absolute, beyond certainty, I was avoiding a lot of truth in the relationship with my ex. I was avoiding a lot, and my body was telling me. Of course, if you're interested in learning more about how our brain and body connect, particularly when it comes to all different kinds of trauma, I recommend checking out the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It is one of the premier books to read on that topic. And so, once your brain finally catches up to what your body has been trying to tell you, you start to get clarity. Clarity really starts to emerge. And from that clarity, you can begin to make different choices. And the opportunities that open up after that, woo, the world is yours. It's fantastic and well worth taking the time and effort to move towards. Now, I wanted to let you know, if you're trying to make sense of what happened in a toxic or narcissistic relationship, I know that I weave that into a lot of the content that I do. I want you to know I'm working on a new guide about why leaving and changing is so hard. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but I have a free PDF now that helps you answer the question if you are in a narcissistic relationship. And so I'm going to take this next one a step further so that, and I'd like it to be kind of comprehensive so that whether you're still in the relationship, you've left the relationship, or you're healing from it, it kind of covers all those steps. And I'm not sure that's going to be possible, but we'll see. In any case, I'm going to be working on that. So if you are interested in getting a copy of it when it's ready, just shoot me a quick email, locatecoaching@gmail.com. I think in the show notes, it's info@locatecoaching.com. Either one will work. Feel free to reach out because I'm going to be real interested to see how that develops. This podcast is a valuable resource for anyone seeking to make meaningful changes in their life. I'm here to support you on your unique journey, offering guidance and encouragement every step of the way. There will be new episodes on the second and fourth Wednesday every month. Please follow on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any episodes. And also, please rate, share, like, follow, and subscribe, all the things. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode on what you tell your brain it believes. Remember, we always have a choice about what we're telling ourselves, and those little gremlin voices can be tamed and quieted forever. You got this. As we wrap up, here's the thing. I've made every mistake. I've literally been there and done that. It's one step at a time, and you'll get there. There's hope. You've got this. If you're struggling in a relationship and wondering if it might be controlling, you're not alone. Download my free PDF at locatecoaching.com/free gift to help you find clarity and confidence. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.